Hello, everyone. Welcome. I think we're going to get started in another minute. Our slides are in the lobby on the event page, but we're going to post them here shortly as well, so you can use them and follow along. All right, well, my phone says it's noon, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out for day two and joining us for our workshop. We are talking today about strengthening your systematic review service. My name's Andrea Goldstein Shipper. I'm presenting with my colleagues, Yenting Fu, Emily Gorman, and Emily Ludeman. We've been providing systematic review services at the Health Sciences and Human Services Library at the University of Maryland, Baltimore for a little over 10 years now, and we want to share some of our experiences with you today. All right, so first, just a little bit of context about where we are coming from. The University of Maryland, Baltimore is the state of Maryland's public health, law, and human services university. The Health Sciences and Human Services Library serves schools of dentistry, medicine, nursing, pharmacy, social work, and the graduate school. So all four of us are or have been members of the Systematic Review Committee at HSHSL. A systematic review task force was created at the library in 2012 to formalize a systematic review service. The HSHSL has always been a library that has really prioritized structuring and packaging services, both for marketing purposes and to increase the visibility of the library on campus. So right from the start, the idea was to be very formal about it. When the systematic review service launched in 2013, we did so with a lot of documentation in place. Internally, we had a vision and mission statement for our service. We had guidelines for processing and assigning requests, and an initial consultation checklist. Externally, we had an informational LibGuide and our service request form on the website. Those served us really well for a long time, but as the service grew, we needed to make changes to the policies and procedures to protect the librarians working with the service from burnout. These changes have really helped us focus on serious requests rather than those that typically remain incomplete. So the changes to our workflow management also reduced a lot of the burden on the systematic review committee. Since making those changes, I left the HSHSL. I am now the research and evidence synthesis librarian at the Cooper Medical School of Rowan University. The CMSRU library serves the medical school and the Cooper University Hospital. When I arrived at CMSRU, an informal systematic review service was in place, but staffing levels really prevented the service from operating as robustly as was desired. I joined the CMSRU library in fall of 2023 and implemented many of the same policies and procedures that we used at HSHSL, just making changes to account for a smaller staff and a different user population. So we're curious as we get started, kind of what kind of setting you're in. Are you in a large academic medical center like the HSHSL? Are you at a smaller medical library like I am? Are you at a hospital? Are you at a general medical library? You can tell us in the chat. For now, we're just curious kind of where everyone is coming to us from. We've got lots of things. Okay. Great. So we have a pretty big variety. While we do that, we also have a quick poll. So we want to know how long your systematic review service has existed if you have one. I'm still going through the chat here to see where people are. Right, so we've got a really great variety between large, medium, small libraries, medical, not medical. We're still getting some poll questions answered.
Yes, thank you for answering 2 questions in different
Yes.
places.
Sorry. Yeah, Zoom polling isn't great when you just want to get some words out of people. So we're going to go back and forth between the chat and the polls a couple times.
All right, I'm gonna end the poll. I think we've leveled off.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. So great. So we have a big variety here. So almost half of you don't have a systematic review service yet. That's great. We're going to give you hopefully all sorts of resources today that you can use in getting yours started. And then a pretty big variety for folks who have one. So 28% have had one for 5 or more years. Hopefully we've got some resources for you as you're growing your service too. And lots of people who are in the first couple years of all of this. All right, so I'm gonna move on and talk about what exactly our plans are for today. So the HSHSL service has been formalized and really highly structured from the beginning. But we experienced a lot of pain points over the last 10 years that have led to improvements to make the process easier for our users and for librarians. So today we're going to focus on developing external policies to ensure that users know the parameters of the service, creating internal policies and procedures to maintain consistency among librarians working on reviews, and implementing workflow management to assign work to librarians and track the progress of reviews. So we have one more poll for now. We are going to talk about a lot of the pain points that we experienced and a lot of the things that have helped us manage them, but we want to know what yours are. So we put in a few that have come up a lot for us, but if there are others that we didn't mention, please put those in the chat too. We want to know what's been coming up for you. It's a good point. I see in the chat that someone is asking kind of how we define a service, whether that's kind of informal or formal. Ours has always been very formal, so that has been our definition. But if you're, providing systematic reviews, searching, or consultation, I think to some extent you absolutely have a service. And there might be things that we're going to talk about today to help formalize it a little bit more, but it's still a service. You're doing the work, you're collaborating with your research teams. All right, it looks like we've got lots of responses, and as we expected, people are all over. We've got all kinds of things. So many people dealing with vague research questions. That's probably the biggest one too. Having to teach teams about everything about the review process, too many requests that go nowhere. And some other things in here, lack of institutional support. Oh, hi, Becca. Broad questions, not great questions, not a lot of staffing. Yeah, these are all absolutely things that are going to come up a whole bunch. And so we're going to walk through a lot of the things that we did in order to, mitigate some of this. So we're going to get started with the external policies and procedures, and I'm going to turn it over to Emily.
All right, thanks, Andrea. Yeah, so developing external policies and materials is kind of the important first step in defining and establishing a systematic review service. And as Andrea mentioned, over the 10+ years of our service, as it's grown and changed, we have needed to modify these policies. So the things that you set up when you're first getting started, may not be the policies that you have a few years down the road. All right, next slide. So the public facing part of our service is mainly our LibGuide, which provides information not just about the service, but also how to conduct reviews and tools to support workflow management. And the front page of the guide, of which this screenshot shows a portion, defines the librarian's role in the service and links to our request form. And then there are also pages about the steps of a systematic review, critical appraisal, PRISMA and other standards, and choosing the right type of review. And so defining who is eligible to use the service is really important. At the HSHSL, we only work with review teams that have at least one University of Maryland, Baltimore affiliate. So whenever we get requests from people outside of our university, we just have to tell them, I'm sorry, our policy is that we only work with UMB affiliates. And you should also consider what policies you want to have around working with students on reviews. I've seen in the chat that that's definitely a pain point for people. What are your policies going to be on reviews students are doing as part of their coursework versus when they're just working on an actual research team with a faculty PI. And then defining what the librarian will and won't do as part of the service is another major consideration. So our librarians typically participate in search development and execution and writing the search methodology portion of the manuscript. And over the years, we've had discussions about whether we will assist in full text retrieval, and have decided to leave that up to individual librarians to decide for themselves on a case-by-case basis, whether they have the time and bandwidth to help with that at all. A lot of us will basically agree to do kind of an automated EndNote retrieval of some of the full text, but then leave anything that can't be automatically retrieved up to the rest of the team. But again, that's not something promised in our service. That's something individual librarians can decide to offer individual teams. And then due to our interlibrary loan payment infrastructure, our policy is that librarians cannot place ILL requests on behalf of review teams to retrieve items. That's another thing that probably comes up for a lot of people is the ILL. And I know that when working closely with the review team, particularly if you already have a relationship with those researchers from your liaison role, if you're a liaison, it can be really tough to maintain boundaries for your scope of work on the project. It can be really awkward to say no when people ask for certain things, but having clear and published public policies about all aspects of your service, whether you're calling it a service or, whatever terminology you're using to reference your collaborations on these types of projects, can really help with these boundaries. Next slide. And then our actual kind of procedures externally are fairly straightforward. So researchers submit our request form, which triggers automated emails to the library team, as well as the submitter. The submitter email, this is something that we have, again, updated over the years. This is what people will get automatically sent back to them when they submit a request, and it contains information about our response time to them, as well as a link to a document that outlines how to prepare for their initial consultation with the librarian. And our service requirements as well are also something that have evolved in our service over time. When we first started out, the only requirements we had were that they be affiliated with our institution and provide us with a handful of seed papers to inform the search strategy. As the service grew, we experienced an increasing number of projects where the librarians did hours of work on the searches, only for the projects to never go further after we delivered the results. That was for a number of reasons. A lot of times the researchers were just inexperienced with systematic review methodology and didn't realize how many results they were going to get, and just kind of panicked or didn't actually have the bandwidth to follow through. And so to address this issue, we instituted a protocol requirement. So our researchers can now they can still submit a request without having a protocol, but the librarians do not begin work on the searches until a protocol is completed. And we created basic protocol templates for both systematic and scoping reviews to help guide our teams on this step. So a lot of times our initial consult meetings with teams will be to talk them through some of the elements of the protocol so that they understand what we need from that. And so we're actually curious to hear from you in the chat whether you all currently require a completed protocol before beginning a search. Because that wasn't something that occurred to us when we were first starting our service. All right, so I'm seeing some yeses, some I wish we did. So maybe some of you will be able to implement that. Some people just want a very good draft, and that's a good point. So we don't require necessarily that every element of the protocol template be completely filled out. We're essentially looking for the team to have thought out enough of the process in enough detail that we feel comfortable that they're going to be able to complete the project. But sometimes people will make tweaks, and we don't require them to register their protocol either on sites like Prospero or OSF, but we do have information about that on the protocol, and we encourage it whenever teams are willing to go through with that step. Great. And then I will pass it off to the next speaker to cover our internal policies and procedures.
Thank you. Yeah, we developed several documents for internal use by the systematic review librarian team. And these include things like our service guidelines and procedures, consultation checklist, and a variety of templates. And I'll talk a bit more about those. All of our internal and external documents are saved in a folder that our review team can access in SharePoint. Next slide. The guidelines and procedures document, it's a Word document for internal use, but this addresses pain points similar to those addressed by our external policies. So we needed firm guidelines in order to keep track of reviews and be able to answer researchers' questions with clarity and consistency across our librarian team. As we all know, documentation is very important to reliability and reproducibility of a systematic review. So in this document, our guidelines and procedures, we outlined things like how to handle requests that come in, how to save librarians' work, and this included where it should be saved. And we also developed a naming convention for files for consistency throughout the team. Each review has its own folder where we save search strategies, protocols, and other relevant files. And at UMB, we use SharePoint, and Andrea uses Google Drive at Rowan. It's important to have policies in place that you can refer to when answering questions, and Emily already alluded to many of these. So a frequent question we receive is, can you get PDFs for me for full text screening? And so we developed a policy that we still rely on. When teams started asking, can you help us? We need to speed this up. Can you help us screen records for us? So we developed a policy. And as Emily mentioned, a lot of this, we do have a policy we can rely on, but a lot of it is up to the individual librarian, whether or not they feel they have the expertise or the time to help. And this also ensures consistency throughout our team since we have a policy we can rely on. As things arise, policies can be modified, of course, but we also encourage a review of our policies at least annually. That's probably adequate in most cases. Next slide. With a consultation checklist, we address a pain point of vague review topics. It still happens, but we try to address it. And we also set the review team up for managing expectations. We developed this document to guide the initial consultation with the review team, but it's also very helpful for new librarians who may not have worked on a systematic review before or who have never led a systematic review consultation. And the checklist is long. This is just a few of the items within our checklist. It covers a wide range of topics. So we define our role in the process. We spend time defining the review question, making sure we understand it. We identify review team members. It's important to make sure a team is actually in place. We ask questions about the protocol and establishing a realistic timeline. We also ask questions about publication, including whether they've identified any target journals yet, and we explain our authorship requirements right up front during this meeting. So it's important during this meeting to discuss next steps, but we also discuss our communication philosophy, letting them know what happens after this meeting, when they should expect to hear from us, and that we also need to hear from them. Next slide. With templates, you can address pain points regarding time management and duplication of effort. And Emily already mentioned the protocol templates that we've developed, and here are just a few others that we rely on. And one, this is just a snapshot here from our systematic review strategies template. So you want to think about where you spend time duplicating or reusing previous work. You can save yourself time, encourage consistency, and even enhance the quality of your work by creating templates. So here are a few we rely on. I mentioned the search strategy here. This has undergone many iterations over the years. For instance, once we started using Covidence, we added information about deduplication in Covidence here. Another template we rely on is, well, Andrea relies on, is the press peer review form. At Rowan, they use press, and so Andrea created a template for that. At UMB, our peer review process is a bit more informal, I should say. We do peer review of each other's strategies, but I can definitely see the benefit of a more formal process like press. So I think we'll be visiting that and maybe adopting some more formal guidelines here. And a final template I'll mention is used when writing up search methods, a search methods narrative. Writing search methods can be tedious. I do not enjoy it, but it doesn't have to be time consuming. So if you use a template, it can alleviate some of the stress involved there. And here the methods narrative template, of course, aligns with Prisma's search extension. The bottom line here is we like templates. So go forth and create templates. And Ting, I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Emily. So we've been talking about policies and procedures. Now we are going to talk about how we manage all these together. So in this part, I'm going to talk about how we manage the services and the requests and in the reviews in both libraries. And we all know no matter the size and the setting of the library, it is important to implement a good tool or some good tools to help assign work to librarians and track the progress of the reviews. Also, it is important to identify the best way to maintain the service to make it sustainable and update with new changes when needed. Next slide, please. I'm going to start in with the managing service. So at HSHSL, we figured that a working committee is the best way to keep the service going smoothly. Our committee typically made up by a couple of research and education librarians and led by one of them. So every year there will be a call out for volunteers to serve on this committee. So it is not always the same couple of librarians that say control the committee. And we love to see new librarians joining and to bring new ideas. And because our service in the library is mature, especially when I'm looking at the poll, many of the peers don't have a full services yet, and compared to our services. So the committee don't usually meet regularly, but when the needs arises, the committee do meet. For example, years back when we talk about, we realized we need some external and internal policies to help us better provide the services and reduce library burnout. It is the committee that to put a work together for researching and create a documents that's necessary. And also the committee made sure that all librarians involved in the service are aware of we have some policies to back us up. And also, like Emily mentioned earlier, we do review and evaluate all our documents regularly, like say yearly. So we look at our LibGuides, our resources link, or our services policies. If there's needs to be changed or updated, the committee do meet together to work on that. And also our committee, the committee are responsible for training new recruited librarians. When we have new hires, those new hires are not familiar with the systematic reviews. It is the committee to put training together to make sure new librarians are exposed to everything that systematic review is required, so they can get their hands on the service as soon as they're ready. So using a committee works very well if the library is, if you're in a large setting of library that the service involve more librarians, so that the related business can be worked out efficiently and smoothly. Andrea is going to talk about how she managed the service in CMSRU. Andrea.
Thanks. So yeah, the CMSRU library is a lot smaller than the HSHSL. It is our director, 3 librarians, and 4 staff members. Again, we only serve the hospital and a medical school. The evidence synthesis service was initially created before I got here by 2 librarians, one at CMSRU and one who now works primarily at our main campus library. Because librarians here have more functional responsibilities, so one is our educational librarian, a clinical support librarian. I serve as the coordinator for our evidence synthesis service, as well as doing the bulk of the searching, because that is my role. All 3 CMSRU librarians, as well as the 4th who works across all of our campuses, are involved in the service though. And as a services coordinator, rather than a member of a committee, I have a lot more ability to make changes as needed to all of this documentation, our templates, procedures, all without a whole lot of red tape, which is a nice change from going through the committee at HSHSL. All right, back over to you, Ting.
So now we are going to do another poll. Like, please tell us, how do you keep track of your ongoing reviews in your library?
I'll jump in just to say, as people are answering this question, we started off at HSHSL with a general spreadsheet, but definitely as we got busier, as reviews started taking a really long time, it was hard to know kind of what stage any review was in, and it was hard for the committee to know which librarians were actively working on reviews and who was available to start a new one. We needed something much more sophisticated to figure that out. I see some good others in here. So lots of folks, you know, if you're the only person doing this, you know, you're just kind of keeping track of your own things. I would definitely recommend something to keep track, even if it's just you. It's going to make life so much easier. All right, so it looks like finished up with the poll. So most people, if they're using something, are using a spreadsheet right now. We've got a couple people using other specific tools. A little plug for all of my co-presenters right now are presenting in the next session about comparing a few of these different tools for tracking. So if you want to learn a lot more about that than we're going to talk about today, come back at 1:30.
I was just going to say that.
All right, well, back to you then, Ting.
All right, thank you, Andrea. Next slide, please. So at HSHSL, order, like Andrea mentioned, we started by managing all our requests using spreadsheet, but eventually we realized we need something more sophisticated. So in 2019, we asked a programmer to develop something for us. Now we are using a in-house built software, what we call systematic review portal, to help us manage all the requests. So the portal enables us to claim new requests and track their status and update records as needed. It is designed in a way that all the requests will flow according to the status of the progress. It helps librarians to get a clear idea of the number of the reviews that are currently working or potentially needs to be worked, and the workload of each librarian. So as you can see on the screen, the portal received incoming requests. You cannot see from this screen, but the portal received incoming requests via online submission form through the HSHSL. That's okay. HSHSL website. When it was submitted, it also generated an automated email to all the librarians to notifying that there is a new request coming. A librarian will then go into the portal to claim the requests. So on this screenshot, you will see the claim button. It allows the librarians to take the ownership of the review. And it also helps to give librarians an idea of the amount of the reviews that needs attention. So if some other librarians go into the portal just to check in what's going on, they will see if there are some claims has been sitting here that been forgotten. Because when the automatic email came in, we claimed the request based on the availability. So if all of us are busy, the request will sit in a portal. So after 3 days, if no one has claimed the request, an email will send out to remind everyone that there is something waiting here. So this portal really helps us to keep track of things that needs to be worked on. So once a request is claimed, it will disappear from the current screen, and you will see from the screen there is waiting for protocol section. The new request will be then moved to that section to declutter the current screen. Next slide, please. So this is a full record of a request. I try to do as small as possible so I can include all the information there. According to our policy, we only start to work on the review when we have the protocol on hand. So you will see where I pointed there. If we do not ask requester to submit their protocol when they submit a request. So when they get their automated email, they will realize they will need something ready. So once we get the completed recorded protocol from the requester, then librarian can manually go into the portal and change the waiting for protocol to work in progress. So this is a nice feature that we really like. And yeah, but regardless of the status of a request, every page of the request form includes the basic information to help librarian know the review status. So the portal really help us to reduce the library burnout and help us to reduce losing track of the coming reviews. Next, please. Andrea is going to talk about her experience using Airtable.
Yes. So since I couldn't bring our homegrown portal with me to CMSRU, we needed another option for tracking our reviews. While I was trying to figure that out, I saw an excellent presentation from the University of Michigan's Taubman Library Talks about using Airtable to track their systematic reviews. And after watching that and playing around with some things, I decided to adapt it for our library. The Taubman Health Sciences Library shares a copy of their database that you can use as a template. There is a link to that template later in our slides that you can use as well. I customized it for our purposes, as well as adding a few new features and automations to keep all of our librarians on the team in the loop about requests. Our evidence synthesis request form goes directly to Airtable, where an automated email is sent to librarians with the request information. Librarians can come into Airtable, claim the review, and then as they go along in the process, they can change the review stage and add notes. Like the University of Michigan, we have a linked form that allows librarians to track the amount of time they spend on reviews. We also have a tab with quick links to resources that librarians might need. That includes our protocol templates, internal documentation that we keep on Google Drive, educational resources to share with research teams, and searching resources for librarians. I added some additional functionality to Airtable early this year. That allows us to integrate peer review of all of our searches into our tracking system. So librarians fill out a really simple form requesting peer review. An automated email goes out to the whole evidence synthesis team, and the peer reviewer then can fill out a modified press form, goes right back into Airtable, and the searcher is notified and can make changes to their search strategies as needed. That way, the requests, the peer reviews, they're all linked in the same review project in Airtable, so it's really easy to find all of that in the future. One thing to keep in mind about Airtable is that this works for us specifically because we're a small library. Airtable is free to use, but if you have more than 5 collaborators who need to edit a database, you need to upgrade to the paid model. So we are just small enough that this works really well. We are hoping in the future to formally expand our service across all 3 of our campuses. But to do that, we're going to need to create separate instances of this Airtable database for our main campus, for our other medical campus, so that we don't have too many librarians on any one database. There is also a link at the end of our slides with a template for this version of Airtable, the one that I use at CMSRU, that you are welcome to use as a template. So you can work with the one from Michigan, which comes with an excellent video on how to get started, or this version that I've put together.
Thank you, Andrea. So the final tool we'd like to talk about is Covidence. We assume many people are familiar with Covidence, but again, looking at that pool, I realized some of the guys probably are not super familiar with that. It's a tool that we use to put everything in one place to help us do better on time management. So it works great. It's really a great tool to streamline many of the review steps in one place, especially on some non-essential tasks. So back then when we first started, we rely on soft reference management tools to help us remove duplicates. And it failed Asian now, but we used to use RefWorks to help us, and some of our librarians using EndNotes. It depends on the software and depends on the results. Sometimes it really takes, I would say, half day just to sitting there waiting to remove duplicates. So Covidence is really great on especially helping on that step. And both HSHSL and the CMSRU subscribe to Covidence, but we manage it differently. At HSHSL, we allow all UMB affiliates to subscribe to and to create review in Covidence, whereas at CMSRU only allows users who work with the evidence synthesis services to access the tool. Only librarians are members of the subscription. So researchers cannot create their own reviews in Covidence.
All right, so we're getting towards wrapping up here, and we just want to share some key takeaways from everything we've talked about this afternoon. First of all, don't reinvent the wheel. You do not need to start things from scratch if you don't have to. All of us learned a ton from the training at the University of Pittsburgh. That is where we all went to learn how to do this in the first place. A lot of our materials were inspired by theirs with their generous permission. Lots of other institutions who you've heard about already have led trainings and webinars on systematic reviews, and they share examples of their processes and their documentation. So, use theirs, use ours, especially if you are starting this from scratch now. If you're doing this on your own, you do not have to write all of this from nothing. We also review our policies and documentation on a regular basis so we can keep things updated as needed. So, if you start getting a lot of requests for something, is it because, there's no documentation for it yet and you don't have a set answer? Now's the time to add that. Finally, don't try to do too much. If you have a really small staff, if you're the only person at your institution doing reviews, know your capacity and set your services policies accordingly. We didn't really talk about it today, but we absolutely have a wait list when things are, much too busy. It is absolutely okay. And I don't think I've ever had someone who had a problem with the fact that I said, I'm happy to work on this, but I can't get back to you for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it might be, depending on what's going on. These researchers all have a ton of stuff they're juggling too, and they understand that you can't necessarily drop everything to work with them. So, don't hesitate to set some boundaries when you need to. And finally, we have, all of our contact information in these slides. Reach out to any of us. We're happy to answer questions. And the last slide has a lot of these resources. So there are links here to both of our LibGuides. There is a link, which we will also make sure goes in the resources, to a Google Drive with a lot of this documentation. A link to that Taubman talk and to our instance of Airtable as well. So, please feel free to use any of those as you'd like to. And I think we're gonna take a closer look now at a lot of these questions. I saw one that came in early from an anonymous attendee about advice on how to persuade library admin that an evidence synthesis service will be beneficial. They're worried about librarian burnout, and because they have a liaison model where people are responsible for teaching and learning, research support and collections, and there's been some resistance. We got a good answer from Kate as well, who is also experienced something similar. I can say, so, HSHSL is a health sciences library. And so the directive to start this service definitely came from the top initially. All of the medical libraries were doing it. And so we were going to do it too. And that is pretty similar at CMSRU. I will say that I was previously at Temple University at the main library, and that's definitely a situation where getting buy-in from a lot of people in administration is helpful. I think if you can show, especially, that people on your campus are publishing evidence synthesis and they're doing it without you, that might be helpful. Part of the mission of our libraries is to provide a lot of research support and to make the research that comes out of the university stronger. And if we're working on the searches, they're going to be better than what researchers are doing on their own. And so hopefully some of that data is helpful. I'd be curious to hear from other people, though, about what maybe has worked well. If you're in a general academic library, what has convinced administration to really start working on this? What else? We have a question about using templates and wondering about if you're self-plagiarizing when you write methods. Layla wrote a response that journals don't really worry about this. I agree. When I worked in a lab, they just use the same methodology almost every time because the experiments are the same. And so I mean, that's probably not absolute best practice, but these things are getting changed a little bit. The way you do your searches changed, the limits, your process changed a little bit. So it won't be identical every time. So I'm not super worried about that one. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts on that. There's a question about Airtable I can answer about the automations. It is primarily automated to contact our entire team when something happens. So whenever someone fills out a request form, the whole team gets an email with that information. When someone fills out a press form, the whole team gets that request. When a press review is completed, the original searcher gets notified. So a lot of it is on that side of things, just making sure people don't have to be in Airtable constantly in order to know what's going on and what is needed. You can also set it up to get, just alerts when someone comments on one of your reviews or something like that. And there's a lot of other things you can do with the automations that I just haven't touched yet. We had a question. Oh, it looks like it was answered about how many reviews we do in a year. Somebody answered that, I think. Let's see. There's a question about an example or a clear description for duties in a job description for liaisons and the coordinator, and percentages for each. I don't think any of our job descriptions had a percentage of how much time is meant to be spent on systematic reviews. Am I right? We've just sort of worked at HSHSL, at least it's just sort of worked out over time, but maybe Emily can speak to that a little bit more.
It does this is an estimate feelings, but it feels at times that half of our time may be spent working on reviews, but it depends on the time of year. Right now is a relatively quiet time. And then it'll ramp up soon, and then suddenly everyone wants to work on their reviews. But we are very fortunate that we have a large team, so we can spread the wealth and share.
Can I comment on adding something? So when new librarians are hired, even though the job duty of systematic reviews are included, the new librarians typically do not start work contribute in the service for the first year or so. But it really depends on their comfort level. Some new hire are more comfortable getting their hands on sooner. Some take a little bit longer time. Even though it may be something described on the job description, but it really something, it's not something happen the same for everyone.
Yeah, and I guess if you're looking for specific job descriptions, I don't have one to hand, but I would imagine if you email any of us, we'd probably be happy to share. They're all we work at public universities, they're publicly accessible. So we can certainly send them, but they don't have specific, time commitments for each of the things that, that I do or that the liaisons at HSHSL do. I think we have gotten through everything that is in the Q&A. There's a plug for all the Taubman talks. Excellent. Thank you. They're great. So if there are any other questions, we are happy to answer them. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. We are excited to hear more from you. Send any of us an email. We're happy to answer more questions, and we're excited to see the rest of the talks.
Bye, thank you.
Thanks.
Can we stop the recording? I think we can do that.